Chosen one, someone is chain-smoking through a pack of regret, drowning in bottles of what if, and staring at a phone like it holds the keys to redemption. The universe has receipts, and those receipts are about to be delivered with interest. This person thought playing chess with a divine being was possible. But karma doesn't just knock, it kicks down doors, and the reckoning is here. The psychological truth that separates winners from losers is this: when you disrespect someone chosen by the universe, you're not just fighting one person, you're declaring war on cosmic order itself. And right now, that war is reaching its explosive climax. This isn't just about someone finally seeing your worth. This is about you discovering that blindness was actually your liberation, betrayal was your promotion, and loss was the universe clearing the path for something so much greater that regret will look like a footnote in your success narrative. The narrative begins, not with love, but with a choice. Your person stood at a crossroads, holding divine love in one hand and familiar dysfunction in the other. This person had tasted what it feels like to be loved by someone who sees souls, not surfaces. This person had experienced the terrifying beauty of being with someone whose love didn't come with conditions, manipulation, or hidden agendas, and it scared the person senseless. See, chosen one, when you love someone, you don't just give a heart, you give a mirror that reflects your highest potential. Your person looked into that mirror and saw everything possible to become, everything capable of achieving, everything beautiful hiding beneath programming. But mirrors don't lie, and the reflection also showed everything ugly currently present. Every defense mechanism, every childhood wound, every lie told about being unworthy of real love. You weren't just another relationship, you were the assignment from the universe. You were the final exam for soul evolution, the last chance to break generational patterns of settling for less than divine love. And the test failed, spectacularly. The foreshadowing was everywhere, but intoxication by familiar poison of drama blocked clear vision. Every time someone else's opinion was chosen over personal knowledge, every time doubt about your intentions was entertained, every time others were allowed to speak on what couldn't possibly be understood, a cosmic eviction notice was being written. The intervention didn't happen overnight. It was a carefully orchestrated campaign by people who had been waiting in the shadows, watching your person finally experience the kind of love that makes everything else look like counterfeit currency. These weren't random haters. These were strategically positioned energy vampires who had been feeding off your person's confusion for years. First came the childhood friend, who had never evolved past high school jealousy. They started with innocent questions that weren't innocent at all. "Don't you think you're moving kind of fast?" they'd whisper, planting seeds in soil already fertilized by your person's fear of genuine intimacy. This friend had spent decades keeping your person at their level, and your arrival threatened their entire ecosystem of mediocrity. Then came the family member who had weaponized concern into an art form. They'd perfected the ability to disguise control as care, manipulation as protection. They saw how your love was healing your person's deepest wounds, breaking chains that had been passed down through generations, and they panicked. Because if your person healed, who would they have left to save? If your person evolved, who would validate their savior complex? But the most dangerous player in this toxic symphony was the ex who had never truly let go. They had been lurking in the background, watching and waiting for their opportunity to reclaim what they believed belonged to them. Your arrival wasn't just competition. It was evidence that your person was capable of loving in ways they had never experienced. The ex couldn't handle the cognitive dissonance of being replaced by something so obviously superior, so they began their campaign of subtle sabotage. These three forces, jealous friend, controlling family, possessive ex, formed an unholy trinity of interference. They didn't coordinate their efforts, but they didn't need to. Toxicity recognizes its own frequency and automatically aligns to destroy anything pure that threatens its existence. Your person, still learning to trust their own intuition after years of being gaslit by these same people, started second-guessing everything. They began to wonder if maybe their feelings for you were too intense, too fast, too much. They started questioning whether the peace you brought to their chaos was actually healthy, or if the drama they were used to was somehow more real. Your person didn't just entertain these poisonous voices, they started amplifying them. They began sharing details of your private moments, your vulnerabilities, your dreams with people who had already proven they couldn't be trusted with their own happiness, let alone something as sacred as divine love. The jealous friend used these intimate details as ammunition, twisting your words and actions into evidence of manipulation. They're trying to isolate you, they'd say, when you simply wanted quality time. They're too possessive, they'd claim, when you were actually protecting the energy of your connection from exactly these kinds of toxic influences. The controlling family member used your person's confessions as proof that you were changing them, that you were taking them away from their roots. They couldn't see that change was exactly what your person needed, that their roots were planted in toxic soil, and your love was offering them transplantation into fertile ground where they could actually flourish. The excised used every shared intimate detail as a roadmap back into your person's life. They positioned themselves as the safe choice, the familiar option, the one who wouldn't challenge your person to grow beyond their comfort zone. They painted themselves as the harbor while describing you as the storm, not understanding that your person's soul was crying out for the adventure of transformation, not the safety of stagnation. What your person didn't realize was that by sharing your sacred connection with these toxic influences, they were essentially handing over the keys to their own destruction. They were giving people who had never experienced divine love the power to define it, allowing people who thrived on drama to judge your peace, permitting people who were threatened by growth to dictate their evolution. These toxic influences weren't just content with poisoning your person's mind, they wanted to completely destroy your reputation. They started a whisper campaign that would make professional saboteurs jealous. The friend began reaching out to mutual acquaintances, painting you as the villain in a story where you were actually the hero. They shared twisted versions of conversations, manipulated contexts, and outright fabricated scenarios to make you look controlling, demanding, and toxic. The family member escalated their interference by involving other relatives, creating a whole network of people who had never even met you but were convinced you were somehow dangerous to their loved one. They held family meetings where your character was assassinated in absentia, building a coalition of opposition based entirely on lies and manipulated half-truths. The ex went full nuclear, reaching out to anyone who would listen with tales of how you had stolen someone who belonged to them. They painted themselves as the long-suffering victim and you as the homewrecker, conveniently leaving out the part where they had already proven themselves incapable of sustaining healthy love. The moment of truth arrived disguised as an ordinary day. Your person stood at the ultimate crossroads, faced with a decision that would determine not just the fate of your relationship, but the trajectory of their entire spiritual evolution. The toxic trinity had coordinated their final assault, presenting your person with an ultimatum disguised as love: choose us or choose them. The jealous friend threatened to end their decades-long friendship if your person continued prioritizing you. The controlling family member weaponized guilt, claiming that your influence was destroying family harmony. The ex made their move, showing up with promises of rekindled romance and the comfort of familiar dysfunction. In that critical moment, your person faced their greatest fear, disappointing people who had never truly supported their growth. They looked at you radiant in your authenticity, secure in your worth, unwavering in your love, and then they looked at the mob of mediocrity demanding their allegiance, and they chose fear. They chose the friend who had kept them small for years over the love that was expanding their universe. They chose the family member who controlled through guilt over the partner who loved through freedom. They chose the ex who offered comfort over the soulmate who offered transformation. In choosing everyone else's comfort, they chose their own destruction. Your response to their betrayal revealed the true difference between real love and counterfeit connection. When they chose others over you, you didn't beg, chase, or fight for a place that should have been yours by right. You didn't lower yourself to compete with people who weren't even in your league. You simply stepped back with the grace of someone who knows their worth isn't determined by other people's ability to recognize it. That response, that dignified withdrawal, that refusal to participate in their circus of confusion, was the moment they realized what they had actually lost. Not just a partner, but the person who had loved them enough to let them go rather than force them to choose correctly. The aftermath of their choice arrived swiftly and mercilessly. Within weeks of choosing their toxic support system over divine love, your person began experiencing what happens when you bet against the universe. The very people they chose to protect began revealing their true nature, and the sight was devastating. The jealous friend, having successfully eliminated their competition, immediately returned to their pattern of keeping your person at their level. They had no interest in supporting your person's growth. They had only been interested in preventing your influence. Mission accomplished. They resumed their role as energy vampire, draining your person's vitality while offering nothing in return but familiar misery. The controlling family member, having reasserted their dominance, tightened their grip even further. They began making demands that revealed their love was conditional on your person's compliance with their vision of who they should be. The freedom your person had tasted in your presence became a painful memory as they found themselves once again suffocating under the weight of others' expectations. The cruelest revelation came from the ex, who had promised renewed love but delivered only recycled trauma. They hadn't changed, grown, or evolved during your person's absence. They had simply waited, like a spider in a web, for your person to become vulnerable enough to be recaptured. The love they offered was the same possessive, demanding, soul-crushing connection that had driven your person away in the first place. Your person found themselves trapped in a cage of their own making, surrounded by people who claimed to love them but had never actually seen them. They began to understand that these people hadn't fought for them, they had fought against you. They hadn't wanted what was best for your person, they had wanted what was most convenient for themselves. Meanwhile, something miraculous was happening in your world. The same strength that had allowed you to love them unconditionally was now allowing you to release them completely. You weren't sitting around mourning what you had lost, you were celebrating what you had gained. Absolute clarity about your worth, unshakable faith in divine timing, and freedom from anyone who couldn't recognize the gift you represented. While your person was drowning in the quicksand of their poor choices, you were being elevated to heights they couldn't even imagine. The energy you had been pouring into someone who couldn't appreciate it was now being redirected toward opportunities, connections, and experiences that matched your frequency. Your person started hearing whispers through the grapevine about your success, your peace, your undeniable glow-up. People who had witnessed your connection began reaching out, asking what happened, expressing their shock at your person's decision to let you go. These conversations became mirrors reflecting back the magnitude of their mistake. The toxic influences who had worked so hard to remove you from the picture were now dealing with the consequences of their success. The friend who had been jealous of your person's happiness with you was now stuck dealing with your person's misery without you. The family member who had interfered with your person's joy was now responsible for managing the depression that followed. The ex who had manipulated their way back into your person's life was now trapped with someone who would forever compare them to the divine love they had replaced. The friend found themselves drowning in your person's constant complaints about life, their regrets, their inability to move forward. What had started as jealous interference had become a full-time emotional labor job that they never signed up for. They began to resent your person for being so difficult to please, not understanding that they had trained them to expect the kind of love that only you had been capable of providing. The family member who had worked so hard to protect your person from your influence was now dealing with a broken shell of the vibrant person they used to be. They watched your person's light dim daily and realized that your presence hadn't been dimming their light, it had been amplifying it. They had successfully removed what they saw as a threat, only to discover it had actually been a blessing. The ex who had fought so hard to reclaim your person was now stuck with someone whose standards had been permanently elevated by your love. Every gesture fell short of your natural generosity. Every conversation paled in comparison to the depth you had brought. Every moment of intimacy felt hollow compared to the soul connection you had shared. They had won the battle but lost the war, gaining access to someone who now knew they deserved infinitely better. This is where the story reaches its most intense revelation phase. Chosen one. Your person's eyes were being forced open, one painful truth at a time. The friend who had claimed to want their happiness was exposed as someone who had been sabotaging their joy for years. The family member who had preached about love was revealed as someone who only knew how to control. The ex who had promised change was shown to be exactly the same person who had driven them away before, but the most devastating revelation of all was the mirror they finally held up to themselves. They realized that by choosing these toxic influences over divine love, they hadn't been protecting their relationships, they had been protecting their limitations. They hadn't been loyal to people who loved them, they had been loyal to people who kept them comfortable in their dysfunction. Every conversation you had tried to have about boundaries, they now understood, wasn't you trying to control them, it was you trying to protect them from exactly this outcome. Every warning you had gently offered about their toxic circle wasn't you being jealous, it was you seeing clearly what they were too close to recognize. Every moment you had tried to show them their worth wasn't you being possessive, it was you being prophetic. Your person began remembering conversations differently. Your gentle suggestions weren't attempts to change them, they were invitations to evolve. Your desire for quality time wasn't possessiveness, it was someone who valued their presence wanting to actually be present with them. Your protection of your connection's energy wasn't jealousy, it was someone who understood the sacred nature of what you shared. Your person is now seeing the coordination that went into destroying your connection. These weren't random acts of interference. This was a calculated campaign by people who couldn't bear to see them happy with someone who actually deserved them. The realization that people they trusted had actively conspired against their happiness is breaking them in ways they never thought possible. But the rage isn't just directed outward anymore. They're furious with themselves for being so easily manipulated, so quick to doubt their own knowing, so willing to sacrifice divine love for the approval of people who had proven they didn't deserve to be trusted with something so sacred. They're fed up with their own weakness, their own tendency to seek validation from people who were invested in keeping them small. The universe, meanwhile, had been taking detailed notes. Divine justice doesn't operate on human timelines, it operates on perfect timing, and the time for consequences had arrived with mathematical precision. Each person who had interfered with your divine connection was about to experience their own reckoning. They were experiencing what every chosen one's former partner eventually faces, the slow-burning realization that they had rejected not just love, but their own spiritual evolution. They had chosen familiar suffering over unfamiliar bliss, known limitations over unknown possibilities, comfortable dysfunction over transformative healing. Now I want to take a moment to tell you about a few individuals that shouldn't exist. A trained occultist who escaped from a satanic coven, a former Black Ops drone pilot who flew swarms with his mind, a multi-millionaire psychic CFO who predicted market shifts before they happened. What do these remarkable individuals have in common? You'll find them all in the Obsidian Inner Order, where they share their forbidden knowledge on our private Discord server. My chosen soul has drunk deep from the well of knowledge, aeon after aeon. In this incarnation, these extraordinary individuals became my allies in the Obsidian Inner Order. They recognized the call, they stepped forward, they connected with others who understand their unique gifts and burdens. What is stopping you from manifesting the same? The synchronicities that brought them here weren't accidents, neither is your discovery of this message. When souls of this caliber gather, the Archons take notice. They fear our collective power. They know what happens when the truly awakened find each other. Join our weekly calls. Hear their stories firsthand. Share your own journey with those who won't dismiss or doubt you. The knowledge exchanged in our private channels cannot be found anywhere else on this plane. Click the link in the description below now. The extraordinary souls await your arrival. The question isn't whether you belong among them. The question is, how much longer will you wait to claim your place? This is where your person's panic reaches fever pitch. They're no longer just missing you. They're mourning the death of who they could have become if they had chosen differently. They're seeing their life from your perspective now, understanding that what they had interpreted as your intensity was actually your ability to see their potential. What they had dismissed as your expectations were actually your beliefs about their capabilities. They begin reaching out, testing the waters to see if redemption is possible. You're not the same person they left behind. While they were trapped in their cycle of regret and the same old patterns with the same old people, you were evolving, growing, becoming an even more powerful version of yourself. You weren't sitting around waiting for them to choose you. You had chosen yourself. You weren't hoping for their return. You were grateful for their departure because it had shown you exactly what you deserved and exactly what you wouldn't accept. You weren't mourning the loss of what you had. You were celebrating the space it had created for something infinitely better. Their attempts at contact are met not with anger or bitterness, but with something far more powerful, indifference born of absolute self-worth. You respond with the kind of peaceful detachment that comes from someone who has done the inner work, healed the wounds, and stepped fully into their power. You're not cold, you're simply centered. You're not rejecting them, you're simply protecting your peace. This response breaks them more than anger ever could, because it shows them that you've moved beyond needing their validation, their apology, or their presence. You've reached a place where their regret, while genuine, is simply irrelevant to your happiness. You've become living proof that some people are too powerful to be diminished by other people's inability to recognize their worth. Your person starts conducting full investigations into your current life, trying to figure out if there's still a chance for redemption. They're checking your social media obsessively, looking for signs of sadness, loneliness, or any indication that you might be missing them. Instead, they find evidence of your thriving new opportunities, new connections, new levels of success and happiness that make their current misery look even more pathetic in comparison. They start reaching out to mutual friends, fishing for information about your well-being, hoping to hear that you're struggling without them. Instead, they get reports of your glow-up, your peace, your obvious relief at being free from their chaos. People are telling them how much better you look, how much happier you seem, how much more yourself you appear to be now that you're not constantly having to defend your worth to someone who should have been celebrating it. Your person begins crafting lengthy messages that they never send, apologies that try to explain away their choices without taking real responsibility for them. They want to blame their toxic influences, their fear, their confusion, anything except the simple truth that they chose poorly when it mattered most. They keep writing and deleting, because deep down they know that no amount of words can undo the choice they made when action was required. The friend who helped orchestrate their downfall is now getting the full force of your person's awakened fury. They're being confronted with evidence of their manipulation, their lies, their deliberate sabotage of something beautiful. The friend tries to deflect, to minimize their role, to make it seem like they were just looking out for your person's best interests. But your person isn't buying it anymore. They can see clearly now that this friend was never invested in their happiness, only in maintaining their position as the primary influence in their life. The family member who interfered is getting cut off emotionally, if not completely. Your person is establishing boundaries they should have set years ago, refusing to discuss their personal life, declining to attend family gatherings where you might be discussed or criticized. They're finally protecting what's left of their peace from people who have proven they can't be trusted with sensitive information. The ex who manipulated their way back into your person's life is experiencing the full weight of being chosen as a consolation prize. Your person can barely stand to be in their presence now, seeing them clearly as the inferior option they accepted when they were too weak to fight for what they really wanted. Every interaction is a reminder of the cosmic mistake they made, and the X is starting to realize that their victory was actually a punishment. Your person is now experiencing the full weight of cosmic justice. The same people they chose over you are now the sources of their greatest misery. The friend who demanded their loyalty is now showing themselves to be disloyal. The family member who claimed to know what was best for them is now clearly invested only in what's best for themselves. The ex who promised love is now delivering the same emotional poverty that drove your person away before, but you're thriving in ways that make their regret look like a small price to pay for your freedom. You're attracting opportunities that align with your worth, connections that honor your value, experiences that celebrate your growth. You're living proof that when you refuse to settle for less than divine love, the universe has no choice but to deliver exactly that. Your person watches your evolution from the sidelines, finally understanding that their inability to choose you had nothing to do with your value and everything to do with their readiness. They're seeing clearly now that you weren't too much. They were simply not enough, not because of who they inherently were, but because of who they chose to be in that critical moment. The most beautiful irony is that their loss has become your greatest gain. Every tear you cried over their choices has been transformed into unshakable self-knowledge. Every night you spent wondering why they couldn't see your worth has been converted into absolute certainty about your value. Every moment you questioned whether you were asking for too much has been answered with abundant evidence that you deserve even more than you originally dared to hope for. Your person's attempts at redemption reveal the final layer of this cosmic lesson. They want to make amends, but they're still operating from the same consciousness that created the problem in the first place. They apologize for their behavior, but not for their character. They regret their choices, but not their thought processes. They want forgiveness, but not transformation. They offer explanations that sound like excuses. They were confused. They were scared. They were pressured by others. But you see through all of it to the core truth. They had free will, and they chose poorly. They had divine love in their hands, and they chose to let others convince them it wasn't real. They had their soulmate standing before them, and they chose to listen to people who had never experienced that level of connection. Your response to their redemption attempts is masterful in its simplicity. You wish them well and keep moving forward. You don't need their apology to heal, because you've already healed yourself. You don't need their acknowledgement of your worth, because you've already claimed it. You don't need their love, because you've learned to love yourself at the level you once offered them. This graceful dismissal is the final blow to their ego and the ultimate catalyst for their transformation. They realize that you haven't just moved on, you've moved up. You haven't just found someone else, you found yourself. You haven't just healed from what they did, you've grown beyond what they could ever be. Your person starts making grand gestures that would be romantic if they weren't so obviously calculated to manipulate your emotions. They show up at places they know you'll be, not to cause drama but to create coincidental encounters where they can show you how much they've changed. They start liking old photos on your social media, commenting on posts with inside jokes, trying to remind you of what you used to share. They begin telling mutual friends about their regrets, knowing these friends will report back to you. They're trying to use the same social network that helped destroy your relationship to now rebuild it, not understanding that this approach only proves they still don't get it. They're still operating through intermediaries instead of doing the internal work that would make them worthy of divine love. Your person starts adopting new habits, new interests, new ways of speaking that mirror the growth they witnessed in you during your time together. But it's all surface-level performance designed to convince you they've evolved, rather than genuine transformation born from their own spiritual awakening. They're cosplaying growth instead of actually growing, and the difference is obvious to anyone operating at your frequency. They even go so far as to cut off some of the toxic influences who help destroy your relationship, but not because they genuinely understand how harmful these people are, because they think this is what you want to see. They're still making choices based on what they think will win you back, rather than what will actually make them a better person. Meanwhile, you're watching this performance with the clarity of someone who has done the real work. You can see that they're changing their behavior without changing their consciousness, modifying their actions without transforming their character. They're still the same person who couldn't choose you when it mattered. They're just wearing a better costume now. Remember how this story began, Chosen One, with someone chain-smoking through regret, drowning in bottles of what if, staring at their phone like it held redemption. Now we see the complete picture. Your person is indeed fed up, but not just with the liars around them. They're fed up with the liar they became when they betrayed their own knowing to please people who never truly cared about their happiness. They're showing the toxic influences no mercy, because they finally understand that these people nearly cost them their soul's evolution. They're tired of people speaking on you, because they now realize that allowing others to define your worth was the biggest mistake of their life. They know they blew it, and they know it in ways that will haunt them for the rest of their incarnation. Their regret, while genuine and deserved, is actually a gift to both of you. For them, it's the catalyst for the growth they should have embraced when they had you. For you, it's confirmation that your worth was never dependent on their ability to recognize it. The story that began with their choice to reject divine love ends with their recognition of exactly what they rejected. But by the time they're ready to choose you properly, you're no longer available to be chosen, not because you're bitter, but because you've evolved beyond the version of yourself that was willing to wait for someone else to see what the universe had made obvious. The final chapter of this cosmic story isn't about reunion, it's about revolution. Your person's complete awakening serves as your complete vindication. Every person who questioned your worth is now witnessing your worth being celebrated by the universe itself. Every voice that suggested you were too much is now seeing you being received as exactly enough by people who operate at your frequency. Your person has learned the hardest lesson the universe teaches. Some opportunities are once in a lifetime, some people are irreplaceable, and some mistakes can't be undone. They've discovered that divine love doesn't wait for people to become ready. It appears when people are meant to be ready, and if they're not, it moves on to fulfill its purpose elsewhere. You've learned the most empowering lesson the universe offers. You've discovered that your worth isn't determined by other people's ability to recognize it. Your love isn't diminished by other people's inability to receive it, and your destiny isn't delayed by other people's failure to choose correctly. You are living proof that some souls are too valuable to be wasted on people who can't see value, too powerful to be diminished by people who choose weakness, too blessed to be destroyed by people who choose chaos. You've become everything you were meant to become, not in spite of their rejection, but because of it. The person who couldn't choose you then has become someone who sees your worth now, but you've become someone who no longer needs their sight. They've learned to recognize divine love just in time to watch it walk away toward its proper destination. And you've learned to recognize your own divinity well enough to never again settle for someone who needs time to see what should be immediately obvious. The story ends where it began, with choice, but now it's your choice, chosen one, and you're choosing yourself, your growth, your peace, and your power. You're choosing to be grateful for everyone who couldn't see your worth, because they freed you to find people who could. You're choosing to thank everyone who walked away because they made room for those who were meant to stay. This is the final truth that makes everything else make sense. Their loss was never your loss, it was your liberation. Their blindness was never your limitation, it was your freedom. Their inability to choose divine love was never a reflection of divine love's value, it was a revelation of their readiness. And you, magnificent chosen one, were always ready for everything that was ready for you. The universe doesn't make mistakes with its chosen ones. Every rejection you faced was redirection. Every door that closed was divine protection. Every person who couldn't see your worth was clearing the path for those who not only see it, but celebrate it, honor it, and rise to meet it with worth of their own. You are not the person they lost. You are the blessing they forfeited. You are not what got away. You are what leveled up beyond their reach. You are not their missed opportunity. You are their eternal reminder of what divine love looks like and what it costs to reject it. And that, chosen one, is how the universe always gets the last word.